Hi, I'm Pastor Tim.
And I'm Pastor Matt.
And we've been having an exciting time together walking through Passion Week. And we thought for today, Matthew and I would do this video together. And so today is Good Friday.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an important day for Christians. Yeah. It's kind of an important day in church. And we're going to look at what Jesus did on Good Friday.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that a day where there's really a sacrifice made would be called Good Friday when something kind of sad is happening. You know, I wonder why it's called Good Friday.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk a little bit about that because it doesn't seem like the right word to describe Friday, but really it's a very good word to call Friday because this is a very good Friday.
Yeah.
So we're starting off right from where we left off yesterday because Jesus was doing his Passover meal with his disciples, and immediately at midnight they go out to this garden called the Garden of Gethsemane where he goes and he prays, and he's kind of praying to get ready for what's coming because Friday's a really big day, and some interesting things happen, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So when he went to the Gethsemane, he went to pray, right? But it wasn't necessarily a prayer of I ask for this or that. It was a prayer very specifically to his Father saying, help me be able to do what I have been called to do, which was this sacrifice that we would see later on in the day. And he prayed and he prayed. And as he was ending his prayer, he saw Judas, who was one of his disciples, who ended up betraying him, bringing the religious leaders and the soldiers to this Garden of Gethsemane. And Judas singles out Jesus to the soldiers by giving him a kiss on the cheek, a semblance of this is who you're looking for. And the soldiers are about to take him away, and something kind of interesting happens. Peter, one of the other disciples who was really known for being a strong individual, lots of courage and gusto, and he thinks that he's doing the right thing by protecting Jesus, his teacher, and he goes and he pulls out a sword and he cuts the ear off of one of the religious leaders' servants. And it's almost kind of like he's fighting back that you won't take Jesus, I'm going to protect him. And Jesus does something that's so cool in this moment is I kind of envision him, putting his hand on Peter and saying, Peter, it's okay. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I've been called to do. And then he picks this ear that's been cut off and he puts it back on the servant's head. And by a miracle of healing, it has been healed as if there was no cut at all. And I think what's so cool about this moment is that Jesus was showing not only Peter, but us that sometimes true courage isn't just fighting and fighting and fighting, but sometimes it's just standing still and knowing that you're doing what you have to do and not being afraid and not being worried, because Jesus definitely was. I mean, I'm sure he had those thoughts, but he conquered those thoughts to say, I know that I need to do what my Father has called me to do. And so he lets the soldiers and the religious leaders take him away off of this garden to be arrested.
And then Peter is still lingering around because he's like, what's going to happen? Is Jesus going to just knock everybody out and get this thing going finally? And so he kind of follows them around and he sees Jesus go to different people, just to the high priests, and he's following them. And one of the things that Jesus had told Peter was that, Peter, you're going to deny him even knowing me before morning, before the rooster crows in the morning, 3 times. Wow. And so we see Peter following him, and he gets asked, do you know this guy? Do you know Jesus? Yeah. And he denies him 3 times. And right when that 3rd time happened, the rooster crowed, and it was morning time. So we finally get to sunrise. He must have not felt very good, and I don't, it would have been really a tough day. It would not have been a good day for Peter to start his Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. This story of Good Friday is really, it's about Jesus and his sacrifice, but kind of an underlying story that I've taken away from this, specifically following Peter, is a story of courage, right? You see Peter in what he thinks courage is, to fight off the religious leaders and to use his sword and to fight his enemies and defeat them, just like he thought Jesus would do as, the Messiah, and what they thought that would look like. But what he learns is that courage doesn't always look like that. Courage can be standing still in the face of adversity and taking it head on because that's what you're supposed to do, just like Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane. But what Peter had a chance to learn through this and through his failures and through his mess ups is that he can have courage even in those faces of adversity. And it may not be with fighting, it may just be accepting, hey, I do know Jesus and I do represent him and I do love him. And he didn't do it that time on Good Friday, but I think think that that was a moment for him to learn from that and then take that in the rest of his life. And so that's something really cool that I learned from this story, specifically following Peter. But so what happens next, right?
Yeah.
So we see Jesus, he's arrested, he goes to the high priest. What's next?
So he ends up getting ordered to be crucified, which is put on a cross, and he walks all the way up to the hill of Golgotha, and he ends up going there, being on this hill and being crucified and suffering a very, very painful death. And he's actually not alone up there, because there's two different thieves or robbers up there with him, one on each side, and one of them actually makes a mockery of the whole thing. It's like, how are you even doing this while you're up there? But the other one realizes there's something special about this Jesus guy. There's something real. There's what Jesus is saying about himself is real, and he actually asks for forgiveness. And what's so cool is that Jesus gives it to him, and he says, "This today you'll be with me in heaven." And I love that, because we don't know what this robber's life was like his whole life, but we do know that like Jesus' sacrifice was enough. And so it was really cool. And I love that, because Jesus, in his biggest moment of pain and suffering, he was still thinking about other people. And he even looks down and sees his mom, and he sees his disciple John, and he's even thinking about them, and he says, Mom, this is your son, and John, this is your mother, because he's telling John to take care of his mom, making sure that she's okay, knowing he's going to give his life and knowing he's on this cross. And so Jesus is so cool, because even in this moment where he's like suffering the greatest anyone had ever suffered, he's still thinking about other people. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. You know, that's one of my favorite parts of this story, is just what Pastor Tim said, that even in a moment where really Jesus was taking on the weight of all of humanity in this moment of sacrifice, that he was still looking for the little things and the little ways that he could serve that maybe you wouldn't think of. Jesus didn't have to look to those thieves on the crosses next to him. He didn't have to talk to them. He didn't have to do that, but he saw the one thief's heart for repentance, and he gave that to him. And then he saw his mother, as you were saying, and I just think that that's so cool, that Jesus, even in the greatest moment of sacrifice of all of mankind, that he still found time in the importance of those little ways that he could serve the people around him. That's just so cool to me. I just love this story so much. Really, that is why it is Good Friday, that we see Jesus doing so many things, you know, that you could call good. Really, they're great, they're wonderful. If it was up to me, I'd call it Amazing Friday. But this story is so cool. I'm so glad, and I'm so thankful for Jesus' sacrifice on this day.
We have a lot to think about on Good Friday, because it's like the pinnacle, it's the climax of the story of the whole Bible, because it's God's action to show his restoring of a relationship between mankind and himself, and that's displayed through his son Jesus. And so cool. We can think about God's love and God's courage to be able to make a way to fix a problem that we had that we couldn't fix on our own. And when we look to the cross, we can think about that, because it is the greatest display of love that we've ever seen. But Passion Week isn't over, is it?
Oh, not at all. We've still got 2 more days.
We still got 2 more days. And so continue watching these videos, and then we can't wait to celebrate the end of the story on Sunday. So we'll see you guys later.